What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Floyd Street's Finest. I am your host, Jeff Greer, joined by Jack Grossman, producer extraordinaire for the gods. Jack, what's going on, man?
I am here, I am alive, and I feel absolutely fantastic. We got an Iarp ruling. There's basketball games. I am great, Jeff. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very tired, and anyone watching the stream will say, that dude has a 9-month old child. That's how I look.
Yes, you need some Rick Pitino in your life. That's what you need.
We all
watch the Pitino presser.
We all need the Pitino press conferences regularly in our lives. But no, Floyd Street's Finest, of course, presented by Great Flood Brewing Company and a part of the Field of 68 Media Network. Big shouts to those guys. The Almanac to get you ready for the season was absolutely awesome. Certainly have read through quite a bit of it. There's a lot there, and just an excellently done preseason or season preview, I should say, magazine. But also, of course, all the pods are back. Those guys are raring to go for college basketball, and highly recommend that you follow all the different podcasts as part of the media network that is Field of 68. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, Jack. We have just gotten back from the Louisville. It was a win. Purely by score alone, the Louisville win over Chaminade. We talked after the red-white scrimmage, but had the, of course, very disappointing for Louisville exhibition loss to Lenoir-Rhyne over the weekend. That certainly put a lot more context into tonight's exhibition as well for expectations and all that. So we'll talk a lot about the preseason, what we make of that before Louisville gets into its season opener against Bellarmine next week and gets the season going, the first under Kenny Payne. But before we do that, Jack, of course, we've got a lot to talk about with the big news of the day, the IARP 5 years and change after the U.S. attorney claimed that they had the playbook for nefarious recruiters in college basketball, and basically turned it into this whole ordeal about how there were federal crimes somehow committed in college basketball recruiting. And at the time, and I wrote this in my newsletter, Jack, it felt like a groundbreaking, earth-shattering college basketball changing forever investigation to say, oh my God, the FBI is finally the one to break through and do some investigating of illegal recruiting activity, illegal in the sense that it was against the NCAA rules. But 5 years later, I think we were all just kind of like, NIL stuff now has brought a lot of that above board. And honestly, the worst punishment was the 5-year wait for the answers, because if you are somehow only just hearing about this on this podcast, the results were,
where have you been?
Where have you been? But also $5,000 fine, some limits on like unofficial visits and some recruiting limitations, no scholarship reduction, and just a weirdly kind of like the old cartoon of the gun that shoots a flag out that just says bang, and that's it. So more than anything else, Rick Pitino, nothing for him, and Chris Mack
too.
Same deal for Chris Mack. And then Kenny Johnson and Jordan Fair, two former assistants, of course, for Louisville, were both hit with show cause orders. Kenny Johnson got a 2-year one. He is on staff at URI, so that's an interesting one that they'll have to deal with. I have no idea where Jordan Fair is. I do know that both of those guys have blocked your old pal Jeff on Twitter, so there's that.
I'll be your mole on that one.
Yeah. Look, bottom line is, Jack, I'm not sure how much longer I even want to be on Twitter, so it doesn't really affect me anyway. So let's talk about this decision. I mean, the third of the IARP's decisions so far, they have not really. They've followed exactly what I think we have talked about, that I was pointed to by someone back when the discussions were happening, by someone on the administrative side, the compliance side. The NCAA, its members had voted to change the constitutional language, and I've said this 1,000 times now, to steer away from postseason bans between the divisions, D1, D2, D3, and conferences, to not do that with infractions cases because they unduly harm the athletes on the current team. And the Louisville case is a great example of that. If you hit this current team with a postseason ban, you're not hurting anyone other than the third now, well, technically the fifth coach since this whole thing started for Louisville, if you want to include the interims, and a bunch of players who are well beyond when any of this stuff happened. And so on the one hand, I get why people were concerned. And I thought that there was at least a level of reasoning there of they were on probation. They broke rules that existed at the time. Even if things have changed, they broke rules at the time. And I could understand where if the IARP approached it from that vantage point and maybe gave a bigger fine, reduced some scholarships and said that kind of stuff.
Which is interesting because David Bink, who was the head chair, said in the press conference earlier, I guess at the time of the recording earlier yesterday during during the presser, that they did take that into effect, that they were trying to apply the rules based off what they were when the violations occurred, which would be 2016, 2017.
But Jack,
but they weren't. They weren't.
But they weren't. I mean, like, let's be serious. Clearly the context here is such that I think everyone and their sister would say it would have been ludicrous for any of these programs when we're talking about a couple $1,000 exchanging hands to have been hammering these programs for that. Now, I also think, I mean, there's a line somewhere in there. I'm glad it's not my job to figure that out. And obviously things are very different now, but I also think that ultimately we always knew this. The NCAA was always going to be in a really tough spot in the infraction side of things because they argued in federal court that the schools were victims in all of this. And so the IARP saw right through that. And I thought that was also an interesting part of all of this.
It absolutely is, because as the NCAA basically tried to argue that Adidas was boosters. And Bink said in the IRB press conference that they did not buy that argument, that Adidas, rather, not the NCAA, that Adidas is not a booster for the school. They were acting independently from the school, and therefore you cannot hammer the schools because of that, which is something that we were, at least in the very beginning, very skeptical of them buying. But at the end of the day, they ended up winning out for Louisville. That looks very good. If you look at a Kansas that obviously is still waiting on theirs as well, the 5-level ones. And yet they suspended Bill Self a couple days ago, which is still
but 4 games is nothing. 4 games.
Well, one of them's a Duke game though, Champions Classic.
Who cares?
Fair enough.
Who cares?
But back to Louisville. You feel like it's a major victory. You do.
Oh, huge.
And obviously, yes, we'll get into it about how the real punishment was the 5 years of purgatory and all those things. But when you look at where we are now and moving forward with Louisville, you avoid a postseason ban. You avoid any scholarship reductions. You get a full week of extra vacation instead of recruiting in the middle of the summer.
I don't think that's how coaches think, but okay.
Well, you know what? For once, you got to look at the positive side. Yeah, you have to embrace it. Yes, you get a full whopping $5,000 fine, which, while I definitely couldn't afford that, I know a big-time university that's making millions, tens of millions of dollars from an ACC media deal, they can absolutely pay that and be very thankful for that. I mean, heck, well, they paid, Chris Mack all the money they owed him when you had about $14 million to buy Petrino. $5,000 is nothing, man. It's absolutely nothing for this school. Heck, we had a caller at ESPN Louisville where I work my day job, said that he wanted to pay the money himself. He called in and said, I just want to do it as long as I can tell Mark Emmert to kiss my ass. Which, of course, is very on brand for that. Yes, what a town. What a place, what a time to live in. But for Louisville, looking forward, it allows Kenny Payne to actually try to establish the program, or rather reestablish the program, to get back to the glory days, to get back to where Louisville was, obviously under Denny Crum and under Rick Pitino, as well as being one of the top programs in the country. The handcuffs are off, the cloud is gone. And yes, it's going to take time, and the team this year is not going to be where fans want it to be. But for the first time in 5 years, you have the opportunity, you have the chance to actually build the program back up from everything that's happened, and not have the, well, what happens if they get banned from the tournament next year? Yeah. Oh yeah, you could go there, but you don't know if you're going to play in the NCAA tournament. You don't know if you're going to have a coach there. You don't know what's going to happen. And all of that's gone now. I mean, like, and you even heard Kenny Payne and Josh Hurd admit it in press conferences, both after the Chaminade game and earlier in the day, for the first time really say, hey, this really did impact and hurt recruiting. Openly say it. And that's, you know, it's easier to say now that it's over that it impacted recruiting, but it's a truth that I feel like we've known all along and have battled with. How much should we, you know, judge a Chris Mack or a Kenny Payne off of? And none of that's there anymore. It's all gone. It's a clean slate. If Kenny Payne goes out there and gets 5 stars, that's great. We can praise him. If he doesn't, and the tenure doesn't end up working out, then you don't have the NCAA IRP to blame. Kenny Payne can actually go out and we can judge the program, and he has a full opportunity to bring the program back and do what he says he wants to do.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, they've started to, he had mentioned one or two other times, like in his preseason pressers, like, yeah, it's affecting us. And then he finally today can just come clean out and say, like, there have been times where he's talked to the mother of a recruit, and it's not a, do you trust me or not conversation. It's a, this just came out, like, this is what it is. And to that point, Jack, that was a long ongoing conversation that I had over Chris Mack's tenure with Chris Mack. And he would mention it as unquantifiable, basically, that it just, it was, this is affecting us, and I'm not entirely sure how, but it's affecting us.
Yeah.
And it's hard for a coach in that position to be sympathetic to his entire tenure, really. To have to be able to recruit in that situation is hard. And to not quite be able to say with any certainty, this is exactly where it's hurting us. I'm sure maybe there were a couple times where he would point to a player or something like that, where things didn't go their way. And look, like, Louisville thought that maybe that affected a few guys a few years ago, like a TJ Leaf and maybe the Andrew Jones kid who went to Texas, that Louisville was in on some of those guys,
good players, really good college players.
Yeah. And their parents would have brought it up. I remember in conversations with them after recruiting visits and things like that. But we just didn't have that many concrete examples of someone flat out saying, like, I'm not going to Louisville because I don't know what's going to happen in that case. We saw people ditch Louisville when news broke, like Romeo Langford's dad just saying, like, we're no longer considering Louisville right after everything came out with the FBI stuff. But again, that was like fallout from the initial news. That wasn't negative recruiting on the recruiting trail.
Right.
And that part was fascinating to hear Kenny Payne start that conversation the last couple of times that he's spoken. So Jack, let's move it forward then. If you're a Louisville fan, what's your frame of mind here? Are you thinking, okay, this came out kind of late into the recruiting process, but everyone knew the IARP was going to come down with this decision soon, probably this year.
Right.
And I'm not in any way, I don't want this to turn into, oh, Jeff's making excuses for this new coaching staff. I really don't need to. But I do wonder if that level of unquantifiable impact existed for the 23 class. I don't know. They're able to get at least 2 guys so far. But you got to think, like, from the mindset of a Louisville fan, maybe I'm thinking now, like, yeah, you might still get some 23 kids, but really the 24 class now might be the one that you're kind of looking at a little bit stronger as a good indicator, but they still need a lot of help. And after watching the two scrimmages and the two exhibitions and the scrimmage, I don't know if this team can afford to wait until the 24 cycle.
Well, a couple things. Number one, we are sitting here on November 4th. And yes, it is later, but the recruiting period and recruitment for players goes a lot longer than it used to.
Yeah.
To where,
and there's transfers. Like transfers are such a game
that's
changer.
the other thing, which that's another, cloud that was kind of hanging over them for this offseason was the transfer portal. And you're looking at guys, like a Malachi Smith, who Louisville was tied to at one point, where it's like, well, I want to go one last year, major college basketball, maybe go pro if I do everything great or all that stuff. But one last year, major college basketball, am I going to go to Louisville where I don't know if I can play in the NCAA tournament? Or am I going to go to Gonzaga where I'm going to play on a top 5 team? I mean, without the postseason,
Big 12, a top 5 Big 12 team.
Correct. Top 5 Big 12 team with Gonzaga, Houston, and Baylor. What a basketball conference that's still going to be. And Kansas too, obviously. But
Lord,
but the transfer portal, I really think it hurt them in that. And the fact that obviously Kenny Payne was in the NBA until late March, that gave a late start on things also. The fact the transfer portal class just wasn't very good this year. To where in terms of depth or there's a couple high-end talent guys, but it wasn't a deep transfer portal class to where there weren't a lot of guys there. But when looking ahead, because that's enough of what's going on now, and I need to mute my my phone, or not my phone, my laptop here, but looking at it moving forward, you got to look at it through the lines of, hey, you don't have those excuses anymore. And yes, the 2023 class,
got to get it going.
Class is a little bit later in the cycle, but with how poor the 2023 and 2024 classes have been viewed nationally by kind of just wide angle, both from recruiting guys, I've heard, guys at the Field of 68 say it. I've heard people at other networks say it. Just the people aren't high on the 2023 and 2024 classes. To where I really view the transfer portal as being, for the short term of how do you build this program back, you're going to have to attack that transfer portal and really get some good difference-making players out of it next year to be able to compete in 2023-24. Because with the NCAA stuff gone, that speeds up the clock in terms of how fast you want to be competing. I'm not going to sit here and say Louisville should be a top 5 team next season.
No, but you gotta be competing for the NCAA tournament.
You gotta be an NCAA tournament team. It's Louisville, and yes, a lot of crap's gone on the last 5-6 years. But Louisville, at the end of the day, has won one NCAA tournament game since 2015. That is not acceptable. And Kenny Payne is rightfully getting that pass this season because of everything that's happened and the situation and stuff that was beyond his control. But going into year 2, the pressure is going to be on him to, at the bare minimum, be an NCAA tournament team. That's what the NCAA Iarp thing does. It tells you, okay, it makes it a lot easier to get back to national relevance. We're not asking you to be gangbusters. We're not asking you to go to a Final Four. Year 2, you got to be in the NCAA tournament. That should not be too much to ask for from a program like Louisville that expects, quite frankly, on a year in, year out basis to be a lot more than that.
Yeah, to be more than just a tournament team, to be a high-seeded tournament team. Well, let's talk about this current team, Jack. Before we do that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Great Flood Brewing Company. What a difference a few months can make. What a great line now, even more so. Come have a beer, bourbon, or glass of wine at Great Flood. The weather is now cooling off again. It's still not too late, though, to sit out on those patios. Enjoy the patio at Great Flood, the friendly staff, as we welcome what will be one of the most exciting fall and into winter seasons for basketball and football, men's and women's basketball, starting up shortly. Women's basketball, of course, top 10 in the country. Got to give kudos to Scott Satterfield and the football team. They have figured it out the past couple of weeks and got on a little bit of a roll here. And Great Flood says that we are proud sponsors, Floyd Street's Finest, and can't wait to serve you. So go check them out. They've got locations in the Douglas Loop as well as out in Middletown. Well, Jack, we got to talk about.
I do want to ask you real quick before we get to the current team. Rick Pitino and Chris Mack getting nothing. Surprised by that, and just any thoughts on those two guys?
No. I think if anyone was going to get anything, I mean, Pitino felt like the obvious choice. Right. I think the whole Max situation, they were all just a bunch of level 2 and level 3 things, right? I mean, it wasn't exactly a it
was really more of a Pitino question than a Mac question, but Mac gets lumped in there as well.
Yeah, and I thought he had a very gracious statement today. And I thought for all the stuff that he did, dealing with all of the challenging times over a couple seasons, that drew some consternation and some frustration. I thought it was just a very gracious statement for him, and I'm not just saying that because he's now a Field of 68 colleague. But if Rob is listening or
let's have him on the pod.
I am. No, I am saying that because they're listening. We'll ask. We'll see. That may be something that we can get with a couple of guys on with Mac.
One other thing, because I know it's become a discussion topic around the city, and I know even though it had nothing to do with the IRP,
all right, I don't even want to talk about the banner. Look, I know where you're going with this. All right, look, I get people are on a high today. Yeah. So I'm annoyed by two things. I'm annoyed by the discussion of people who are annoyed by the discussion to the point where they're like, these events are not connected.
Even though that's what you're doing right now. That's what you're doing right now.
Everyone knows
you're
they're not
connected. I'm annoyed guy.
I'm annoyed by everyone else. Everyone is annoying me. I am very irritable. And I like
now you're really talking like a true father of a 9-month-old.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't need some person on Twitter to be the arbiter of what is related to the IARP case today and what isn't. We know. Everyone knows. You don't have to do your little fact checks on Twitter. We know. So let's just move on to the fact that Louisville fans today are on a high. They are buzzing from this result. They have dreaded this day for 5 years. 5 years they have dreaded what this would be. The assumption, literally right up until it came out today,
would be
I got emails from people off my newsletter wondering if they were going to get the death penalty. I mean, people were terrified, Jack. So let them have their day. They want to talk about the banners. Let them talk about the freaking banners.
Fair enough.
It matters to one group of people, Louisville fans, if they have a banner. It does not matter to anybody else if there is a banner in their basketball arena. So
the question is, do you think it'll happen at some point?
Yes, I think the banner will be back soon. I don't know if that's through legal action. I don't know if that's just from Louisville saying, F it, we're putting it up. I don't know if that's from the NCAA taking a step back from infractions altogether and saying, you know what, the vacation of records, who cares anymore? And they just go and I don't know. But I don't think think about it this way. This is how I'll frame this entire discussion. Think about all of the things that have transpired since the original news came out in 5 years. Okay. In 5 years, all of these different things, just for me personally, have a house, have a kid, got married, have worked multiple. I'm on my third full-time gig since 2017 for a variety of reasons, which I love. So don't take that the wrong way. Saw Rick Pitino in Belgrade, Serbia. We were talking about this earlier. Got to cover European basketball across the continent. I mean, all of these things. COVID-19, I got it twice. I've got 2 nieces now. I've got like all of these things. And Jack, you could sit there and run down.
I was a sophomore in college. When the Katina Cal, I'll take it even a step farther. When the Katina Pal scandal broke, I was a senior in high school, and I am now on my 3rd year out of college.
There you go.
That's how long the cloud's been over U of L.
Right.
That's how long
my
it's
point
been.
is, but here's my point. In those 5 years, so much has changed that I say, let's turn now. You pivot from here today to 5 years from now. And like, is it that crazy to say there's going to be some sort of like confederation of conferences that is like kind of they're left to their own devices, but they play for a championship at the end, and it's just the ACC, Big Ten. Like, it's not that crazy to think that the NCAA like doesn't exist in a few years. So that's my point is, a lot could change very quickly, and that's why for me it's easy to say, like, if you said by 2030 will the banner be back up? Will the famous national championship banner and the lesser discussed 2012 Final Four banner be up at the Center? And my answer is yes. Within 5 years, I bet you a good amount of money that they will be up there. So let's talk though quickly, Jack. We've got a few minutes left here.
I apologize. I just figured that was something
it's a big talking point.
Worth hitting on, because a lot of people care about that around Louisville.
I know. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. If I were a Louisville fan, I would care about it.
Geez, you're not a Louisville fan, Jeff?
I've been telling people for years, Jack. I've been trying to convince them for years, and they don't listen to me. I actually got in a very very heated one direction, and it was not me who was heated. Conversation with a very drunk Kentucky fan who is a friend of mine. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, who like refused to believe that beat writers covering any teams, for the most part, are taught to be objective. He really had a hard time with that whole concept, but he was so drunk. It was St. Patrick's Day. He was so drunk that all of the ways I tried to explain it just was not getting through. So I just had to kind of politely see if someone else would start taking bullets instead of me. But let's talk quickly about this current Louisville team. Okay, Jack, you've got 2 exhibitions. You've got a scrimmage in hand now. And I think they're in real trouble, but I also think there's some positive developments out of this as well. I do think the toughness factor, the defensive toughness, the defensive effort just is not where it needs to be with Louisville. But Kenny Payne said that himself after the game. So I think the biggest thing about Payne and this current team is they seem to be very self-aware. They seem to understand that they have limitations. How could you not when you have the 2 results that you just had in your exhibition games? But I do think that if you're Louisville and you are Kenny Payne, who has been so adamant that they are building, that they're trying to lay a foundation, that this is not this season, it's not this week, it's not this month, it's not 2 months from now, they're building this foundation to February to beyond. You say, okay, JJ Traynor looks like a totally different person playing for Louisville. Jalen Withers, totally different person. Ellis has taken on a much more assertive leadership role consistently through these games. So there's some things there. It's great to see Mike James literally just like out there playing. And I do think that Kamari Lands has shown that he is going to be a real factor for Louisville for however long he is at U of L. I do have some concerns about them in a variety of ways. There's just not enough offensively for them right now. I think they need a couple of their big guys, especially, to be way more physical and dominant in the lane and dunk the ball and go up strong and be more decisive around the rim. So I'm curious to see if it plays out in a way that is an ongoing problem and they lose a bunch of games, or if it plays out that way and they start churning out some tight results, but they get themselves to double-digit wins and they're at least in a place where you say, okay, there was some progress here.
If looking for positives, Jalen Withers to me is the biggest one. I mean, he's hitting the 3-point shot. Good. He looks incredibly comfortable on the perimeter. He's creating offense for both himself and others. You're getting everything you would want at anyone's expectations for Jalen Withers right now. He's been really, really, really good. Other than that, I mean, even Ellis, who scored 28 points against Chaminade last night, He looks like he's just forcing the offense too much. He's looking too much score first. I get it. There's not a whole lot of options in terms of spot up shooters or guys in great offense, but you can't just dribble up the court and jack a three or drive one-on-one and try to beat a guy and have that be your offense. And too often throughout 2 exhibition games, that's been Louisville's offense. Is LL is just trying to do everything himself without reversing the ball, without getting the 4 or 5 passes that Kenny Payne wants to see, without getting the multiple lane touches, all those things, to where L. Ellis, again, we've hit on this a million times before, L. Ellis is the only guard. It was, could L. Ellis play point guard? And he's shown flashes of it, but he hasn't consistently ran the offense yet. He's still more bring the ball up the guy and let's try to score a little too often.
I don't blame him.
I don't blame him because there's not a lot of options, but he, even though he's a good player and he has a lot of potential, he's not Kobe Bryant. I mean, you gotta be able to get yourself into some better situations as well. And then for a team that has so many offensive limitations, you gotta get after it defensively, force turnovers and get deflections. They had 2 deflections in the loss to Lenore-Rhine. 2 deflections. Can you imagine what Rick Pitino would be doing if he saw that? I mean, that's
Jack.
Yeah.
That's no.
That's a scary thought, is what it is. But you need to force turnovers. Heck, they forced as many turnovers against Lenore-Rhine as the football team did against Wake Forest. I don't know which program that says more about. Great for football or bad for basketball, but that should never be happening.
For basketball.
That's bad for basketball.
That is bad for basketball,
but
Jack.
When you have those limitations offensively, you cannot play. And Kenny Payne said this as much in the press conference.
Yeah.
You cannot play half-court basketball. You got to be aggressive defensively. I would like to see them pick up full court a little bit more because they have length and athleticism, and force turnovers and get out in transition. You got to do that, and you got to rebound better. They only out rebounded Chaminade by 6. I think they only out rebounded Lenore-Rhine by 5. You're playing Division II teams. You need to dominate them on the boards. The front court is supposed to be the strength of the team. If that's going to happen,
it's a big front court. It's athletic. And Kenny Payne was talking about feeling like they were going to be a good offensive rebounding team. Well, you need, and again, to his credit, they are very self-aware. They are very self-aware of what they are right now and that they're not doing things well enough.
So the bigger question
is, they've got to be dominant on the glass, and they've got to be able to get putbacks and score there. And they have to be able to, like you said, they have to be able to get easy buckets in transition, because this team is not going to grind out efficient half-court offensive possessions maybe until January, February, or maybe not this season.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to say. The question is, how much can they improve throughout the season? Jalen Withers, I feel like solidly through 2 games, very small sample size, dangerous thing to do, but he seems like the best player on the team. I'm with you on Kamari Lands. I love Kamari Lands' game. I think he's going to really develop into a really good college basketball player. Does that happen in a month and a half, or does that happen by March, or does that happen next year?
Yeah.
I feel it's going to happen at some point. It's just a matter of time with them. And how many other pieces can you get around there also? Can Sidney Curry be the guy that he was in flashes last year? Can Al Ellis be the guy that he was in flashes last year? That's where you can kind of piece things together and be a much better defensive team and have a chance to go out and win some games people don't expect you to win right now.
Yeah. But key word there, Jack. Flashes.
Long way to go. Yeah. Very long way to go.
Long way to go to find consistency. And that's been something that Kenny Payne has talked a lot about. So, there's going to be some slack, but this is Louisville, and no one knows that better than Kenny Payne. And, fans just want to see progress. It's a lot harder in the social media climate that we exist in now to be patient, but they just want to see some progress. And if your team's fighting and competing against good teams, great. Can't be losing to teams that on paper they should be beating. But Jack, we're running out of time here. So I do want to just tell everybody, thank you for listening. Final four pick. You're throwing. No, we're going to do it. We'll do it next week. I'm not ready for that. I'm not quite ready for that. But But I need to do. I'll
The
tell
look
you
of
right
shock
now.
on your face was phenomenal there.
Yeah, I have not done enough research to really sit down and think about it. And the way last year went, I really need to make sure that I do some quality stuff before, because you roasted me, justifiably so, for that pick last time. But thanks so much for listening, everybody. Jack and I will be back trying to do more stuff off of games and off of things that people are talking about. We are also scheduling a Kamari Lands interview that should be the next pod on your feeds. So thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the weekend celebrating no postseason ban or anything really of significance for Louisville men's basketball.